Hello everyone, and welcome to the Henchman's Memoirs. This is our campaign diary of our 5e Dark Souls of Drakkenheim campaign, and we have so much to cover from last session. I'm going to jump right into the action. Our party is here in Queen's Park Garden. This is their second visit there. Their first time they brought back some eldritch lilies, but now they've found out from the Hooded Lanterns that there's more going on in the Queen's Park than they knew about, and several Hooded Lanterns have gone missing, and now the party needs to hurry over there and find out, what it was that they didn't quite clear out in there, and whatever threats are still lurking in the garden. So if you haven't been through this part of the module and you're a player, you need to tune out now, because I'm going to go straight into spoiler land and talk about what's actually going on in Queen's Park. So what happened was Queen Lenore, who was the queen of the whole kingdom. In my setting, it's the five dominions, the Empire of Darkon. So she's more of an empress in my setting. But in either case, she was the queen when the meteorite hit, and some of the royal counselors tried to get her out of the city with some of her handmaidens, but she only made it as far as the secret exit that goes out into this garden that was named for her and built for her when she married her husband. And she kind of got trapped there by the curse and by the twisted magic of the meteorite. And now she lives in this perpetual fairy tale state where her handmaids have been transformed and some of the knights that protect her have been transformed. And now she's in this sort of weird, twisted fairy tale thing where I was interpreting it as day after day she has this feast. She has this birthday feast. And then, night falls and it starts all over again, and all of the weird creatures of the garden are all sort of preparing for this feast, and so forth. The idea that I'm talking about actually comes from Winter's Daughter by Gavin Norman. So there's something very similar going on in this excellent module for old school essentials. And while most of the stuff I do is dark fantasy, I do like a little folk horror and sort of dark fairy tale kind of stuff going on. So my intention in this whole section of the adventure was to really lean into this dark fairy tale, twisted folk horror kind of vibe for the party. And I had 3 encounters that they had to get through so that they could reach Lenore, and then they would have to, she's been transformed into kind of a Medusa, and they would have to figure out if they're going to fight her or try to rescue her. There's talk in the book about what happens if the party turns her over to any of the factions and they try to restore her so that she could potentially become a contender for the throne, right, at the very end of the campaign. So that was all very open to interpretation, and I came up with 3 cool fairy tale-esque horror encounters that I wanted the party to have to go through before they could reach her. So you enter the garden and you start rolling on this mini game table where you're searching. You're trying to get enough successes to find your next goal. And if you don't get enough successes, you run into a random encounter, something bad, something, just some plant monster that's just going to attack you but not give you anything for your trouble. And every hour that the party is in the deep haze, they have to roll to resist contamination, because the whole garden is in the deep haze. And I only gave them 3 injections of Aqua Expurgo that the Hooded Lanterns had left. They sent a bunch of lanterns to the park, which is why the party is going in the first place. The party only had 3, so Atticus, the artificer, decided he was going to go ahead and not take the injection and just try to he had the highest constitution, and Thaddeus the druid could give him whatever it is, endure elements or something to give him a boost on his saving throw. He actually never failed a saving throw. He was fine when it came to the deep haze, but the other party was using charges of their Aqua Expurgo. So the very first hour they searched, they rolled great. They got several successes, and so they encountered my first little scene. And my first scene, I set out a whole bunch of red cap minis on the table, and I started describing them as they're the gardeners, right? They're all clipping and trimming the hedges, and this guy has got sort of a magical leaf blower kind of thing that he's blowing leaves around. I even decided one of the red caps, one of those push mowers, those old from the 50s push mowers that has the little blades, like he had basically a little cart that had those on the front and back, and he's pedaling for all he's worth, and he's driving this little riding mower around trying to clean up the clippings. And there's this fire where they're throwing all the clippings and stuff, and the guy with the leaf blower is blowing them into piles. And the idea, let me tell you fans, the idea of this encounter was they were going to go up to these guys, and as soon as these guys saw him, they're going to be like, hurry, you've got to help us get all these clippings burnt so we can, get ready for the feast tonight. Hurry, what are you doing, sluggards? And actually the party has a gnome druid, and there was some talk. Well, he could try to go up and talk to them. They're almost like gnomes, right? They're little twisted fey gnomes. Maybe he could talk to them in Sylvan, and they could, work something out, or maybe they're supposed to interact with these guys. And even the druid once said at some point during all these discussions, well, maybe they know where the urban rangers are. Maybe they know where the hooded lanterns are. Let's talk to them. Let's ask them. They don't seem aggressive. So if they had done that, they would have recruited them into helping them clean up. And then here was my fairy tale encounter. There's a treant deeper in the garden, and the red caps have to give him trim his beard up and trim his hair and everything, because they're gardeners, they're landscapers, and his beard is all foliage. They have to get him all ready for the feast tonight. They have to get him looking proper and sharp. The problem is he doesn't want to do it. He doesn't like having his hair cut. He doesn't like being fussed over, and he'll just pound them and knock them halfway across the garden if they try to get in there and do their job. So the party was going to have to distract him by playing the rhyming game with him. And every sentence he said, whatever cadence and whatever word he ended with, they had to try to come up with a rhyming line, because he loves the rhyming game. As long as the party's distracting with the rhyming game, then the red caps can get in there and start trimming him up and making him look right. And every time the party doesn't rhyme correctly or quickly enough, or their sentence doesn't make any sense in the context, then he lashes out and hits somebody or kicks somebody, and they take a bunch of damage, because treants are pretty high CR, as I remember. And they have to start over and all this stuff. And this whole little weird dark fantasy, dark fairy tale kind of encounter that I had planned. And then of course the red caps would offer to tell the players where they could get some invitations, because they can't get in to see Queen Lenore without an invitation. They can't go to the feast without an invitation. So they were going to tell them about the trolls, but if they asked the red caps what they knew, the red caps were going to be like, oh yeah, we know where the hooded lanterns are, but you have to help us first. You have to do this, blah blah blah. So that was going to be this whole thing. My party was like, nope, we don't think we're supposed to mess with these guys. We don't see that they're holding the rangers hostage. We don't think it's important that Glenn picked out all these minis and set up this entire battlefield. We're just going to use Pass Without Trace, and we're just going to skirt around them and see what happens next. So now they had to roll again without the advantage of any directions from the red caps. But again, two of them, their total was over 20, and so that gives you extra positive results, extra successes. And so they were able to find the next encounter even without their help. So the next encounter is my trolls, right? And I set my trolls up, and they have, look at these cute guys, look at these little buddies. They got their troll hounds that are sleeping nearby. Look at him, his tongue's lolling out. And I set this all up. They've got a table, and they've got one of those ovens, one of those sort of Bronze Age above ground ovens that they made. And so this one is wearing a big frilly apron that says "Kiss the Cook," and this one is wearing one of those chef's uniform tops and a frumpled chef's hat. And the party, the monk crept a little closer under the benefit of Pass Without Trace, and the dogs had a chance to smell him, but they didn't smell him. And he crept a little closer, and you could see what was on the table, because they're like, oh, they're probably making lunch out of our hooded lantern guys that we're looking for. But no, it's a bunch of fruit. They saw a bunch of apples. They saw a bunch of pears. They saw a few weird mutated fruits from elsewhere in the garden. And these guys were obviously trying to make pies. And next to the oven is this great big pile of discarded pies. Each one has like one slice out of it or one bite out of it. There's this huge pile of 100 discarded pies. And these guys are arguing back and forth, trying to figure out how to make a good pie. Now they're speaking in Jotun, which is my campaign's like giantish language, and nobody spoke that. So even the party was joking. They're like, "Does it sound like the Swedish chefs?" It's like, right? The whole thing. Surely the party's going to realize that these guys are, they should go up and interact with these guys. I didn't come up with this whole description and all this just on a whim, right? I picked out these minis and everything. And so what's supposed to happen is it's another challenge like with the Triad. They go up there and yes, the trolls have some extra invites, and I do these hilarious voices for, well, I don't know if I can give you my invitation if you won't help with the pies. This whole thing. And so they have to help with the pies, and they have to make some skill checks, and they have to, get the oven just right, blah, blah, blah. Just a little side thing where, they help the trolls make a delicious pie, and the trolls are like, shouldn't we put in more fish skin? I think fish skin in apple pie is delicious, and I have this whole thing planned out. So you will never guess in a million years what the party did instead. They decided these guys weren't of interest to them. These guys weren't important to the story. And so they went around a different way and kept searching on me. So now they don't have their invitations, and they're going back to basically the pre-written part of the module, more or less. They come into this area, and this is the sort of final area where the party can get into the actual royal grotto, where they're going to encounter Lenore. So the party again rolled gangbusters for a third time. A couple of them failed their saves versus contamination, but again, those were the ones that had Aqua Expurgo. So the party realizes they're running out of time of how much longer they can wander around in this garden. But again, their perception and survival rolls were gangbusters, and they find their way here to the final area. So this was a grotto for the queen, and there's a bunch of statues around here of Queen Lenore. The problem is they've all had their faces etched off. This is supposed to be a big clue to the party. And so they looked around. The only person who recognized Lenore as being she wears all these gaudy, outrageous outfits and everything. Ruby Rod is how I was picturing her. And the only person who rolled well enough on the history test was the druid, and he had already turned into a bear so that he could tank those constitution saving throws. So he wasn't able to communicate with everyone else what was going on. So the party's all looking around and so forth, and there's a big, heavy door right here. So these stairs kind of go up, right? So this platform is up, 25, 30 feet above this area here. There's a door under here that lets you into this area below. So the party opens this door. Well, I should say, more correctly, Dirtnap Pete is standing here. The bear is like rubbing his back against the main statue that's had its face ripped off. And the artificer and the warlock and the sorcerer are out here kind of looking around, and Dirtnap Pete just decides to open up the door. Well, inside this area underground are what's left of the handmaidens of Lenore. Now, they've all been turned, they're still referred to as just handmaidens, but they use the stats of dryads. And I was able to print out these minis with them in what I thought were very appropriate Drakkenheim colors, these purples and blues and everything. And so it was on like Donkey Kong. As soon as he opened that door, he opens the door and he rolls 3d6, because that's how many the book says how many dryads there are, and there was 11. So pretty average. And here's what I had come up with for the dryads. I had this idea that, and this is also right out of Winter's Daughter by Gavin Norman, I had this idea that they would be willing to let the party go by if they were willing to give, each one of them was willing to kiss one of the dryads. And then there's this crazy table from Winter's Daughter that has all these weird side effects if you eat these fairy mushrooms. And I was basically going to do variations on those side effects if the party kissed them. So, of course, they were supposed to hear from the trolls, you don't look directly at a handmaiden, right? You shyly avert your eyes, and when she says, "Why won't you look at me, good sir?" you say something about, your beauty is, I wouldn't want to, gaze upon such beauty, I might never love again, and all this kind of stuff. Of course, they know what's going on. They have a charm ability, anybody who looks at them. But they will play along if you flatter them and know the procedure, right? So old Pete opens the door. He sees 11 basically Playboy bunnies in this little underground grotto. And he's like, "Hello, ladies." And the first one, I was trying to think of... I wanted to name them all after Playboy playmates, right? So I was like, Pam Anderson comes up to you. But he's looking at 11 dryads, right? And he has no invitation. They didn't know he was coming. So, of course, they're all going to hit him with their charm ability. It's not a question of can he make 11 saving throws. I even had mercy on him. It was like only 4 were thinking fast enough to hit you with their charm person ability. And the first one, Pam Anderson, immediately he was smitten. So he's standing up here looking at them. And the other guys, their players know what's going on, but the characters don't. So the artificer... Atticus is like, "What's going on over there? I heard you say hello." And Pam's like, "Oh, what's your name? Who are your friends? What are you here for?" Right? And basically here I started getting really precise, and I kept going around the table. I wanted to give everybody a chance to react. Like each time Dirt Nat Pete said something to Pam Anderson, I wanted to give everybody else a chance to react. And then I was going to come around to him, and the conversation would go a little further. Because the dryads are not going to be immediately hostile. They did charm him, but they're not necessarily just going to start, unloading on the whole party. And if they had charmed the whole party, then, totally different situation, right? The party would find themselves in front of Lenore anyway. So I really didn't know what was going to happen. And our Hexblood... Our sorcerer, Nexel, is some kind of hag-born, hag-blood, hex-born something from Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, where they have some hag blood or hag influence on their lineage. And he was actually a changeling left for a mortal child and was kind of raised by these mortals, but he doesn't know all the ins and outs of his own background among the Fae, right? So he glances in there, and he rolls a really good nature check, and he knows what a dryad is. He knows about their charm ability. I even gave him the bit about how you're not supposed to look at them, but you're supposed to play coy and be like, "Oh, I would not wish to gaze upon your loveliness beyond mortal eyes." I gave him that whole thing. And he asked me, he's like, "Well, okay, I am a hexblood. Could I, could my knowledge of the Fae be to my advantage?" And I was like, "Sure." "You mean like give you advantage on persuasion checks to talk to them or whatever else?" He's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Sure, absolutely." So after I said that to him, I keep going around the circle, and the druid was getting ready to just I don't know what he was getting ready to do, probably turn back into his gnome form and cast some kind of spell. But then when he heard that Nexel might be able to talk to them, he held off. So we come back around to Piedor, and he's talking to he's talking to Pam Anderson, and we come back around. We get back around to Nexel. I'm like, "Okay, what are you going to do, buddy?" He's like, "I'm going to fire a fireball into the grotto, pat right over Peter's shoulder, and center a fireball back here in the grotto to get as many of these dryads as I can." You could have knocked me over with a feather. I was so expecting that he was sitting there writing out his flattery and whatever else he was going to do. It's the sound of the record scratching, right? So, okay, fine. So he fires a fireball into this underground grotto, and he rolls his damage. Dryads don't have that many hit points, and so the ones that fail their saving throw are instantly killed, and the other half are down to about half their hit points, right? So I'm picking up all these dryad counters off the table. I'm like, "Okay, I guess we're doing this. We're rolling for initiative. And as I was about to go back and roll initiative, my eyes pass over the Dryad, stat block, and I see magic resistance. Dryads have advantage on all saving throws against magical effects and spells. So I re-rolled all the ones that were killed, and now only one of them was killed, and the rest of them had used their magic resistance to survive. So this is now it's on. Pietro comes out, and he's trying to stop Nexel because he's still charmed. But Nexel, I think, did Eldritch Blast or something and killed Pam Anderson. And so now Pietro is free. The bear comes around, the artificer comes around, and then it comes around to the Dryad's turn, and they slam they cast Entangle out here, and then they slam those doors because they don't want to get fireballed again. And my party was acting all surprised. And basically, this is the inside of the grotto. I had this turned around so the entrance was up here, but basically, they slam these doors. They're all at half hit points. Their beautiful hair has been burned. Their beautiful skin has been burned. They did all cast bark skin, but that didn't help them against the fireball. They ran for it, right? Immediately after the party closed the door, they come running down here through this little area into here where Queen Lenore is. And the party's out here. They get themselves all revved up and ready to go. And Nexel is averting his eyes. Now the party's figured out, you got to avert your eyes from these Dryads, right? So Nexel is averting his eyes, and they're going to throw the door open. He uses his Pearl of Power that he got from a faction reward. He's going to fire another fireball down in here. And I gave him like a perception check to realize out of the corner of his eye that this room was empty now before he cast the spell. He did well on the check, and so I think I even gave him disadvantage, but he did well enough on the check that he realized, whoa. He saves his last spell slot and realizes they're not in here. So the party comes in here and looks around, and somebody did a survival check to see which way they went and could tell they went this way. So the party comes down here, through here, and into this area. And this area has more statues of Lenore, and it also has a statue of the whole royal family, but all the faces, including the royal family thing, all the faces of Lenore have been chipped away. So the rest of the royal family is there, the king and the two daughters, but the queen's face has been chipped off. And so this is basically a lore room where the party can start putting together some clues about what's going on here. So they come in here, and they're just dillying and dallying. They're making history checks. They're making search checks. I'm going to come over here. Well, I'm going to come over here. I'm going to look around. Okay, in my mind, time is of the essence, gents, because these Dryads went back for Lenore herself, right? And Lenore, she normally has like a little face mask on or like a veil thing, and then her hair is covered with this head covering thing. But of course, when she finds out they're being attacked, which I didn't think of it, but she probably would have heard that fireball anyway, but now she definitely knows they're being attacked. She pulls all that stuff off. She comes down this hallway at the head of a whole row of angry Dryads to attack my party. So Pietro, our monk, he makes the perception check to hear these feminine feet coming down the hallway, and he gets to act before these ladies come out right here. And instead of warning the rest of the party, instead of, averting your eyes, he decides he's going to stand right here and just ready in action to punch the first person that comes out through the hallway. So Lenore is in the front of the group out here, and the two people that she sees are Pietro and Thaddeus, the gnome druid. And she unleashes her gaze attack, which doesn't turn you to stone. It gives you a level of contamination, and it does a whole bunch of radiant damage to you. Right? So now the party is like, holy strombolies. She does enough radiant damage to Thaddeus to turn him from a bear back into a gnome, and she ended up hitting him with two levels of contamination. So far, nobody has had any levels of contamination in this whole adventure. Now he's got two, and he's gonna have to roll twice to see if he gets some kind of crazy mutation, and it is on. So this was a situation a little bit like the fight against the Harpy Queen, where the party is like, okay, this is tougher than we thought it was going to be, but do we want to run or do we want to try to finish this? So we were running out of time. It was almost cutoff time. The guys had to work the next day, all this stuff. It was getting bad. So basically we did what I hate to do, and I hate to do to you fans, which is we basically had to cut off our session in the middle of a fight. And so now the question is, are they going to be able to defeat Lenore and all of these dryads, or are they going to have to run? Are any of them going to get put down to 0 hit points? I have no idea. And I'll tell you, them bypassing those encounters that I planned just 6 or 8 months ago, I would have been really bent out of shape about that. I would have been really disappointed. But now, as a DM, to me, that's part of the fun of playing Dungeons and Dragons. Part of the fun of being a DM. You just don't know what's going to happen, and you get to watch as your players think through things and pull out victories from the very jaws of defeat. So join us next time when we'll be following along in the battle against Queen Lenore.